Our breaking news, former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn is willing to testify before federal and congressional investigators, but only if he is granted immunity. That's according to his lawyer. Joining me now, CNN's David Gergen, Nia Malika Henderson, also CNN political commentator Matt Lewis, legal analyst Laura Coates, historian John Meacham, author of American Lion, Andrew Jackson in the White House, and CNN national security analyst Juliette Kayyem. Good evening. Laura, and Flynn's attorney is saying, this is part of it, he said, General Flynn certainly has a story to tell should the circumstances permit. The letter then goes on to say, no reasonable person who has a benefit of advice from counsel would submit to questioning in such a highly politicized witch hunt environment without assurances against unfair prosecution. Flynn's attorney isn't using legal jargon here, but when you read that, what are you thinking?
I read that and say you are asking for immunity. And of course, the issue is not why you'd request immunity. Of course, if you're going to be presented with a criminal investigation, and you've already heard the FBI director say there is a criminal investigation into whether or not people in the Trump campaign, to which he was a part of, were involved in collusion. You have that. You also have the Logan Act allegations that he may have represented the United States in a way he wasn't supposed to. Not a very well-used law at all by any stretch of imagination. But the really bigger question is, why would I give you immunity? And as a prosecutor, people ask all the time, the reason I would give immunity is if there is a bigger fish to fry that you can actually give me. Or if with what you're going to tell me, I can find nowhere else. So what he has to do first is tell the prosecutors, kind of off the record, what I'm offering here, why it's worth your while. And then if they decide that it is worth their while, guess who has to give immunity? It's not just the FBI, it's the Department of Justice, which means that Jeff Sessions' recusal now has monumental implications.
Let me ask you something. This is someone sent it to me, and I thought they made a very good point, Laura, and this is for you. And then I'll get to everyone else. And this is someone who was in the military, and he sent it to me, and they also sent it to my colleague Anderson. It says, my guess is that Lieutenant General Flynn will fully support and protect the Trump administration, fall on the sword, and even take some more blame with the Russians. I do believe he will ultimately float something esoteric, but with some news value and defaming about the Obama administration. What do you think of that? I found that email interesting.
It is interesting because his letter suggests that he wants vindication from the kind of, not only the witch hunt he's expecting, but one that he believes he was a victim to.
But would he fall on the sword for the entire Trump administration to make
I would not be shocked, because a lot of people nowadays seem to be willing to lose all their credibility for the administration. But
would the FBI allow that if they know that going into it? No.
No.
Okay.
And the reason is because, first of all, I have to believe you as the FBI and the prosecutor that what you're trying to do is assist the investigation, not simply save your tail. And what you have to give me must be useful. Remember, if they can prosecute everyone, why would they exclude one? Unless that person has information I can get nowhere else.
Gotcha. I got you. Okay. Laura. Senator Mark Warner says the goal of the hearing was to determine if there was any actual fire, but so far there's a great deal of smoke, he says. Given the testimony that we heard today, do you see fire?
Yes, but I see fire in a way that people don't consider, and that is circumstantial evidence does carry a great deal of weight. And I know there may not be a smoking gun, there may not be a source of this actual flame, but that's going to be one of the reasons why someone like Michael Flynn's testimony may indeed be very useful to the investigation, because it may be about placing certain people together or getting certain facts together in a circumstantial way that will lead you to conclude the obvious, whatever that may be ultimately. So what this tells me is that we actually may be having an investigation. Remember, this all comes down to one thing. We are presuming that there is, in fact, a collusion perhaps, but the investigation has to actually take place. But what cannot happen is a premature undermining of that investigation. It would be a great thing if General Flynn was in a position to actually give information that the FBI does not already know, or that would help the Senate or the House not only restore its credibility, but also illuminate an issue that we do not know much about at this point. But that's absolutely true. This is very, very disturbing. But one of the things that is very obvious to me is that we aren't discussing foreign policy, because so far the policy has been that a foreign government has perhaps interfered, and that has to take precedence in many respects.
Do his former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn willing to testify before federal and congressional investigators, but only if he is granted immunity. I'm back now with my panel. What do you think? Do you think, John Meacham, do you think Nunes lasts on this committee?
I don't think so, and I think that it's an easy way for the Republican leadership to show that they're being responsive to what's a growing and very uncomfortable story.
Yeah, David Gergen, you think he lasts?
No.
That's
You said you wanted a lightning
simple and
round.
concise. I wanted a lightning round. What do you think, Nia?
Yeah, probably not. I mean, if you see what's happening here, I mean, the Senate is essentially maligning the House as it goes. I mean, Senate Republicans are essentially talking trash about the House, and you imagine that somebody's going to step in and ask Nunes to step aside and recuse himself. So we'll have to see what happens over the next couple of days.
And that would have to be Paul Ryan, Juliet, if that happens.
It would I mean, Paul Ryan can show a backbone right now and do it. And I'll tell you why he should do it also, not just for the hearing. Other Republicans on the Intelligence Committee are being brought down by Nunes, and I suspect they don't like it very much either.
Yeah.
So it's a be smart, political, and the right thing for Paul Ryan to just yank him.
Will that happen, Matt Lewis?
I think it might, and here's the reason. According to Paul Ryan today, Nunes did not tell him that the information came from the White House, but that it came from a, quote, whistleblower type person. And so maybe he's misleading the Speaker of the House.
Laura?
Every day that Nunes refuses to provide the information to his committee is every day that the committee loses its credibility indefinitely.
Is there any recourse for that, for if you are not, if you tell things that are infactual, or if you lie? If you lie, does Nunes face anything?
Well, you can lie to the media, but you can't lie under oath, and you can't lie to the FBI. If that's what he's doing by withholding information or trying to mislead or undermine, then there will be criminal consequences, I'm sure.
Your reaction to tonight's breaking news, Nia, the news that the former Attorney General Michael Flynn, National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, saying that this in a statement that on behalf of Flynn, General Flynn certainly has a story to tell, and he very much wants to tell it. Should the circumstances permit, no reasonable person who has the benefit of advice from counsel would submit to questioning in such a highly politicized witch hunt environment without assurances against unfair prosecution. What do you think?
Well, I mean, the two phrases that stick out to me from that statement are General Flynn has a story to tell, and that last word, prosecution. Prosecution, of course, brings to mind whether or not that story he has to tell involves any criminal activity that he engaged in or anyone else engaged in. I imagine this is going to be something that's very troubling for this White House. This is a White House that keeps getting sort of knocked back on its heels, hasn't been able to get out front of this Russia investigation, has never been able to really give a credible explanation to what has gone on here, other than to say, this is basically a conspiracy theory from Democrats who are still hurting from Hillary Clinton's loss in November of 2016. So we'll have to wait to see what Sean Spicer says tomorrow at that press briefing. Obviously tonight they haven't said anything. And one of the things we've seen, I think, over these last weeks since Flynn has been out of this White House is this effort to really separate this White House from General Flynn. At first, he was kind of a man who was wrongly maligned by the press, and an honorable man that this White House really didn't want to let go. And then if you listen to Spicer over the last week or so in talking about Flynn, at some point he referred to Michael Flynn as a volunteer from the campaign. So you see them trying to have some distance between Flynn and other figures whose names have come up in this Russia investigation. But my goodness, they've got some trouble on their hands now.
It's not as bad as they did with Manafort by saying that he had a tangential role and it was limited and whatever. They haven't gone that far yet, but still trying to separate themselves. Laura, can you explain to us exactly how immunity works and why would Flynn do this?
Well, immunity, there's basically two kinds of immunity. There's one that says anything that you testify against, you're not going to be able to be prosecuted for. And the other one says, if whatever you tell us, we cannot prosecute you based on that unless we have some independent knowledge of the information you gave us. But obviously, everyone wants the former, where you get transactional immunity for everything you have. Either way, it goes to the Department of Justice. But immunity is really a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you have to convince the prosecutor that it's worthwhile to give it to you, meaning whatever you tell me, I have to actually already not know from somebody else, and two, that you are not the biggest fish I'm going after. The second thing is, well, here's how it works in the courtroom. A prosecutor who gives immunity is going to say, look, he's got nothing to lie about. He has no criminal, noose that's waiting for him. He has no incentive to lie. On the flip side, the defense will say, well, there's no sense of why he would tell the truth or why he'd be forced to if he has immunity. And that's why Mark Warner and other people want to have General Flynn testify without these conditions, because it actually boosts the credibility to say, listen, I'm here of my own accord. I don't risk a criminal action. I don't fear one for whatever reason. And therefore, I can truly be credible and forthcoming. And of course, it's very interesting here because you want to look at the motivation of what General Flynn's doing. His letter suggests it's vindication, personally, but also remember, there was a law that was passed in this administration that anybody who worked for the Trump administration could not lobby on behalf of a foreign government ever again. And that was his primary source of income prior to doing it. So of course, he's looking and saying, I've got a story, I can't do anything else. And that's going to factor into a prosecutor saying, are you credible, and what's your motivation?
Interesting. Laura, can I ask you this? And you can answer, and you can put whatever you wanted to say in there. But Nia mentioned Manafort, former campaign manager, CEO, former advisor Roger Stone, former policy advisor Carter Page. I just want to give their titles here. They're going to have to testify before the House, and so they say they are. Does this put more pressure on them?
Well, yes, because of course the person who gets the immunity first is usually the one who scares everybody else and gets the best deal. But remember, none of the other people have asked for immunity yet, which begs the question, why has Flynn? But if the White House really is smart right now, and I think that they have some smart lawyers probably surrounding them, their biggest fear right now is what was not covered prior to the inauguration. Remember, there's executive privilege, there's the presidential privilege, so there's going to be some limitations on what Flynn may be able to discuss about what he and President Trump discussed. But however, if the investigation's really about the campaign, none of that's going to be privileged. And so the White House counsel is going to have to figure out what are the limitations and what period of time are we most fearful of. And the FBI has told them since July to January 20th, that's your problem. That's not fake news. That's the amount of time that they're worrying about what Flynn knew and what will not be covered, presumably under presidential privilege.
I think that fake news thing is going to come back to haunt them. Nia?
A lot.
A lot.
Come back to haunt them.
Nia, Matthew, Laura, thank you.